Well, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be presenting at the 2023 RCSI Alumni Gathering Scientific Meeting. I would like to thank Dr. Maura Briscoe and Cuivan and Ale and the Association of Medical and Dental Graduates for giving me the opportunity to present. Today, I'll be speaking to you about the three pillars of well-being: gratitude, relationships, and nature, and I have no financial disclosures. So I'll give you a bit of history. In 2019, I gave the first talk of many to the Michigan Society of Eye Physicians and Surgeons and the American Academy of Ophthalmology on the subject of physician burnout and what we can do about it. And I put this slide up. It's a hamster on a wheel, reflecting what I thought was my life at the time, a never-ending pattern. I wouldn't say it was quite burnout, but something wasn't right. And at the time, I made connection with Dr. Ruth Lerman, who is head of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program at our hospital, William Beaumont Hospital in Detroit. And I took her course, and I've taken 2 courses since. And then this happened to all of us. And as much as we have modalities to combat burnout, mindfulness, yoga, exercise, diet, the reducing the fear of seeking help. When I told one of my colleagues what I was going to talk about, he said, please don't talk about burnout. We're all burned out about burnout. So today I'm going to talk about skills, not pills. Let's talk about gratitude, our first pillar. Gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of others. And that's ancient Rome, Cicero. A noble person is mindful and thankful of the favors he receives from others, the Buddha. Gratitude is the deepest touch point of human existence. But it was this gentleman, Dr. Robert Emmons, who felt that we need to apply gratitude to a science and not reduce it to an emotion. In 1997, there were only 3 studies on gratitude. In 1998, Dr. Emmons conducted a randomized control study on gratitude journaling, and this predated the concept of positive psychology that you mentioned, Professor, adopted by Dr. Martin Seligman. So what is gratitude? It's an affirmation of the good. It's saying yes to life. It's a recognition that this good originates outside oneself. If we don't understand gratitude, Emmons says, we cannot understand ourselves. It is foundational. So the study was called Counting Blessings versus Burdens. And the question was, is expressing gratitude the key to unlocking happiness? The study involved 8,000 participants ranging in age from 8 to 80. They were randomly assigned to different experimental conditions, and they kept journals, both daily and weekly. They were asked to record their positive and negative affect, coping behaviors, health behaviors, physical symptoms, and overall life appraisals. And what were the results? Those in the gratitude condition offered improved disposition, or had overall improved disposition. They offered even more emotional support and help to others. They were more optimistic about their future, and frequency was important. Daily interventions, daily journaling led to greater gratitude than weekly practices. Sleep and exercise improved in the process, and they reported fewer health complaints and physical symptoms. So these were randomized studies, not just surveys as in the past, but we're under no false illusions. The momentary experience of gratitude is not the same as a grateful disposition, and we need to be consistent to improve the quality of our lives. There are physical health benefits because gratitude leaves a stamp on our bodies. As we know, it helps improve sleep, it lowers blood pressure, people become more health conscious, there's reduction in inflammatory markers, prevents overeating, increases exercise activity, improves immune system by increasing IgA levels. It improves pain tolerance. It even decreases hemoglobin A1C by 9 to 12%. There are many mental, psychological, spiritual, and health benefits. People are less materialistic, more forgiving. There's even reduced feelings of hopelessness in substance abuse and suicide patients. It enhances spiritualism. In the workplace, 53% of employees are willing to stay longer if the boss appreciates them more. 66% of employees are willing to quit their job if they feel underappreciated. 81% are motivated to work harder if their work is appreciated. So gratitude builds better relationships. Employees feel happier, valued, and cared for. There are social benefits, not only romantic, family, and friends, but in a family, it improves the adult and child dynamic. It fosters a healthy social circle because like-minded individuals are friends. Neuropsychological studies, gratitude activates the limbic system, releasing dopamine and serotonin, the feel-good hormones. Neurobiological studies prove that gratitude regulates sympathetic nervous system. It filters those negative ruminations to focus on the positive. So why does it work? We talk about the arc of gratitude. It amplifies the good. It rescues us from that negativity bias, and it connects. It's social. Gratitude causes relational strengthening. Remember, it goes beyond oneself. It counters that negativity bias. And Emmons says it's the emotional spackle that gets in the cracks of relationships and keeps them from falling apart. So what are some myths and pushbacks on gratitude? It leads to complacency. Someone said it's the badge of surrender. It's a naive form of positive thinking. It makes us too self-effacing. You need to be religious to be grateful. You have to feel gratitude to act gratefully. It isn't possible or appropriate in times of adversity or suffering. Indeed, the opposite is the truth. So this is a wonderful little tool that Brian Sexton at Duke devised called the Gratitude Letter Tool. All of you take 5 minutes to write a letter of appreciation to someone, and it could be to anyone. It increases happiness up to a month. It increases your well-being and that of the recipient. Think of the teacher that taught you that really didn't know her impact on the students, and she receives a letter from one of you. The second pillar is relationships. And this is a beautiful book that just came out in January that I read by Dr. Waldringer and Schultz of Harvard. And it's called The Good Life. What makes a good life? And it's based on the Harvard study of adult development, which is the longest scientific study of happiness. The study began in 1938 and is still going on today. And the purpose was, what makes humans thrive? There were 724 original participants, 3 generations, 1,300 descendants. And it's the longest in-depth longitudinal study of human life ever done. Surprise, what did they find? The good life is not about career achievement, exercise, or a healthy diet. It's about good relationships. Relationships in all forms contribute to a happier and healthier life. Is it too late for all of us? No. Your childhood's not your fate. Your natural disposition is not your fate. The neighborhood you grew up in is not your fate. So why is this difficult? You know, the good life is not a concern for modern day society. Our brain often misleads us in our quest for lasting pleasure and satisfaction. And psychologists say we're bad at affective forecasting. We're bad at forecasting the benefits of relationships because it's all messy, isn't it, sometimes? So why are we forecasting badly? Because we're under the spell of culture. Family, American culture says that money, achievement, and status leads to a good life. You know, we compare ourselves to others, and the more you do that, the more miserable you feel. And then we compare ourselves to, entertainment and social media. So the Harvard study also showed that we have to work with the hand that's been dealt to us. For instance, in the 1960s, there was a study comparing African Americans in a poor county in Georgia with Caucasians in Eastern Finland, which are supposedly the happiest people in the world. And the people who, there was a similar pattern in both those populations. The people who are more socially connected had less risk of dying at any age. There's also something called the happiness set point, that the baseline level of happiness that is determined by our genetics is determined by genetics and personality traits. However, actions and choices really only account for 40% of our happiness. Still much is within our control. So the way we feel in life is only partly what happens to us, what happens around us, and greatly what happens inside of us. So we need to access and treat the health of our relationships. Just as muscles can atrophy with disuse, so can relationships. And this protects us against stress, depression, even declines in memory and language. There's quality versus quantity. Close bonds are important, spouses, family, friends, but also community groups, conversations while walking your dog or with your mail carrier. There's no right number of friends. You don't have to be an extrovert. So there's some tools for building relationships, but I'll talk about just a couple of them. As far as taking stock of your social universe, see which friends are enriching and which are depleting. And we all know that these relationships are fluid. Talk to somebody new, even if you don't know them. And remember, don't take it personally if you're rejected. It's not about you. Don't cancel those plans. And please, it's very important to sustain social fitness. So I'm going to talk about the third pillar, nature. These are pictures of our home in northern Ontario, near Parry Sound, Ontario. And we're going to talk about nature connectedness. And we know that the more connected you are with nature, you're happier. There are lower levels of depression and anxiety. It's a vehicle for strengthening human relationships. It's a place to connect with others free of distraction. And beautiful, calm, and serene nature promotes pro-social behaviors. So we know the definition of nature, the green spaces, the blue spaces, but even watching nature documentaries can benefit. So mental health benefits on nature are available to everyone, regardless of where we live. And COVID-19, 45% of people visiting parks and green spaces, it said that they help them cope with the pandemic. There was more improved well-being. There was a protective factor for good mental health. And it was, the well-being was linked to the proximity to natural spaces. So what are nature's effects? It generates increase in positive emotions and decrease in negative ones. It even gives you a relief from mental tiredness. It improves attention span. And again, it increases pro-environmental behaviors. So what are some pathways to renew our relationship with nature? Using senses, emotion, beauty, meaning, and compassion. Senses, listening to the birds, smelling the flowers, experience the joy and calm of nature, taking the time to appreciate nature's beauty, even through art or music. Celebrate, the meaning of life in nature, and take actions to preserve nature. In Japan, they have something wonderful called forest bathing. And it's, they felt that in the forest, all senses are engaged. So Miyazaki quantified the benefits of the outdoors, which decreased heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol. It increased natural killer cells, and the phytoncides from the trees even increased joy and calm. But there's a challenge. In 2050, 66% of the world's population is projected to live in cities. And, in the UK, 62% felt the benefits of spending time in the countryside or by the water, but 57% even felt benefits just by daily walking to the shops or driving to work. So how much time is good for us? Research tells us about 2 hours a week, but when time and connectedness were measured together, time was less important. We need to have universal access to nature. There are inequalities based on socioeconomic status, residential location, occupation, disabilities, culture, gender, and age. And green spaces are not accessible to all, and there are some safety concerns. What are other barriers? Lack of time and company, caring responsibilities, for instance, for elderly parents. We know that women, youth, disabled, Blacks, Asians, minority ethnics feel less safe in nature. There's also a gender gap. And the disabled also are afraid of violence and hate crimes in nature. There's a teenage dip that from 10 years old to 30 years old, people start spending less time in nature. How can we, resolve that? Possibly greening areas in and around schools, disadvantaged areas. We need to apply universal design principles to make parks and playgrounds more accessible and inclusive. We know that this has decreased stress and anxiety in migrant families, for instance. So nature also helps our social connections. We talk about relationships. It's somewhere to talk free from distractions, appreciate our surroundings. It promotes pro-social behavior, including volunteering or donating to charity, and it gives us a calming sense of hope. There are benefits in children. We know that parents and guardians' connection to nature can influence their child's future connection. What are some solutions? Encourage education outside the classroom. There are benefits in the elderly. We know that the NHS has green social prescribing, which includes leading the elderly to local walking communities, gardening, therapeutic horticulture, leading to a greater sense of belonging and personal achievement. So what can we do? We can find nature wherever we are. We can connect with nature using your senses, get out in nature, bring nature to you, exercise in nature, take time to reflect in nature, and above all, please protect nature. This is an interesting story in Detroit I'm about to finish. The Udolph Garden. Piet Udolph is a famous garden designer from Holland and from the Netherlands. And the garden club in Detroit wrote him a gratitude letter saying how they admired his work and how they wanted to start a garden in Belle Isle, which overlooks the Detroit River. And he came and he liked the fact that this garden would be accessible to all. So relationships were formed, volunteers were brought in, and they created the beautiful Udolph Garden in Detroit. And he now says that it's his favorite city in the United States. So I want to thank you all for your attention. I want to thank my friends and colleagues that are here. I also want to thank my husband, who's taught me much about gratitude and love. Thank you.